The black blade lay among scattered trinkets on the cobblestones, unremarkable except for the faint crimson runes that pulsed like dying embers along its edge. It had tasted the blood of 1,000 would-be heroes, had whispered doom into the ears of kings, had severed the threads of destiny with each swing. And now it lay in the dirt while a gangly human with ink-stained fingers stared down at it, apologizing profusely to a merchant who was backing away like the man had sprouted tentacles. "I'm so terribly sorry about your cart," Ren said, crouching to gather scattered merchandise. "We're studying this map of the western irrigation channels. Fascinating system they've developed since the drought, and I didn't see where I was going. I'll pay for any damages, of course." The merchant's eyes fixed not on Ren, but on the black sword. "Take it! I don't want it! It's yours now!" he rasped. "Take everything and leave me be!" He turned and fled through the marketplace, shoving through the crowd. Ren blinked, adjusted the spectacles that never quite sat straight on his nose, and looked down at the blade. That was odd. He reached for it with his ink-stained hand. The moment his fingers brushed the hilt, a seam split along its surface. What had appeared to be decorative notches rearranged themselves, revealing a tiny mouth lined with jagged teeth like a miniature shark's. The mouth gnashed and snapped at his thumb. Ren yelped but didn't drop the sword. The little mouth bit down harder, teeth scraping against his skin but failing to break it. A frustrated growl emerged from the hilt. "What the absolute festering void!" The sword's voice was surprisingly high and nasal for something so ominous looking. "Why aren't you bleeding? Why aren't you dead?" Ren held the blade at arm's length, blinking rapidly. "You talk, and you have teeth, and you tried to bite me. Why?"
"Brilliant observations from the hairless monkey,"
the sword snapped, its tiny mouth twisted in disgust.
"I am Malice, drinker of heroes, harvester of champions, bane of the worthy. I have ended bloodlines, toppled dynasties, and feasted on the souls of the mighty."
The mouth turned downward.
"And apparently I can't even break your pathetic skin. What manner of protection do you possess? Divine blessing? Arcane barrier? Some rare bloodline?"
Ren turned the sword over in his hands. Despite his scholarly appearance, he showed no fear, merely curiosity. "I don't have any protections that I know of. I'm a cartographer."
"A what?"
"I make maps." The sword's mouth gaped open, then snapped shut.
"Maps? Maps? I've been reduced to being handled by someone who draws pictures of places. Oh."
"Well, it's rather more complicated than that. There's elevation consideration, ley line confluence."
"Do not care."
The sword vibrated with rage.
"This is impossible. I've slain dragon slayers. I've corrupted paladins. I've driven saints to murder."
Ren tucked the sword carefully into his belt. "Fascinating. I think my wife will want to see you."
"Wife? You have tricked some poor female into mating with you? What desperate human would—"
"She's an orc, actually," Ren said mildly, re-rolling his map and gathering the rest of the merchant's abandoned goods into a neat pile for the market guards to sort out. The sword went silent for 3 full seconds.
"An orc? You're married to an orc?"
5 wonderful years next month," Ren said, smiling faintly as he made his way through the marketplace toward home. The rhythmic sound of metal striking metal grew louder as Ren approached his cottage on the edge of Rivercross. Behind the main house stood a large forge where Gorza worked, the smoke from its chimney visible throughout the valley. He followed the familiar path around to the back, where his wife's broad-shouldered silhouette moved with grace tempered by strength. Gorza stood well over 6 feet tall, her deep green skin gleaming with sweat as she hammered a glowing breastplate into shape. Her midnight black hair was pulled back in a tight braid that hung down her muscular back, revealing the traditional forged scars that marked her cheekbones and strong jaw. When she saw Ren, her tusked mouth curved into a warm smile that transformed her fierce features. "Little Mapman returns," she said, her voice deep and melodious despite its rough edge. She set down her hammer and wiped her hands on her leather apron. Find anything interesting at market?" Ren held up the black sword. "Actually, yes. This tried to kill me. Do you know anything about it?" Gorza's smile vanished. She crossed the space between them in 2 strides, taking the sword and examining it with expert eyes. "Ancient make, binding runes, quality steel despite the strange coloration." She turned it over and jolted slightly when the tiny mouth appeared.
"Unhand me, she-beast!"
Malice snarled. Gorza's eyebrows rose. "A talking weapon. Rare." She turned it toward Ren. "What does it mean? It tried to kill you." "It bit me." Ren held up his unmarked thumb. "Or tried to. The teeth couldn't break my skin." The sword's mouth twisted.
"It's impossible. I should be feasting on his soul right now. I've tasted the blood of 1,000 warriors, each stronger than this ink-stained weakling."
Gorza narrowed her amber eyes. "You're a soul-drinking blade, cursed to kill its wielders." "Not cursed, blessed, created for a divine purpose." The sword wriggled in her grip. "And if you don't return me to your pathetic mate immediately, I'll—" "You'll what?" Gorza asked, the challenge clear in her tone. The little mouth worked silently for a moment.
"I'll continue to be extremely rude."
Gorza barked a laugh and handed the sword back to Ren. "Fascinating. A legendary murder blade, and it cannot harm you." She squeezed his shoulder affectionately. "Special, my Ren is."
"Painfully average, more like,"
the sword muttered.
"That's it. That's the problem."
Ren tilted his head. "What do you mean?" The sword's mouth curved into what might have been a smile if it weren't so full of needle-sharp teeth.
"You, map maker, possess what my creator never considered protection against, the heart of absolute mediocrity."
"That's not very nice," Ren said, frowning slightly.
"It's not an insult, it's a magical diagnosis,"
Malice continued, clearly warming to its theory.
"You're neither brave nor cowardly, neither brilliant nor stupid, neither good nor evil. You exist in a perfect middle ground. You are the lukewarm tea of humanity."
Gorza's laugh rolled out like thunder. "Lukewarm tea? My husband?"
"Look at him. He knocked over a merchant's cart, and instead of running and fighting, he apologized and picked everything up. Who does that? Where's the drama, the passion, the moral clarity?"
Malice's little teeth clicked together in frustration.
"I was forged to corrupt the mighty and destroy the exceptional. This one barely registers on any scale worth measuring."
Ren looked mildly offended. "I'm quite good at cartography, actually."
"Which is neither a virtue nor a sin. It's just a drawing."
The sword made a sound like a tiny wail.
"I'm stuck with the magical equivalent of beige paint."
Gorza wiped tears of mirth from her eyes and gently took Ren's free hand. "My beige paint man, who knew this would protect you from ancient curses?" Ren smiled up at her. "I suppose being ordinary has its advantages." Not ordinary, Goza corrected, touching her forehead to ease in a gesture of affection that made Malice groan. Balanced. 3 days later, a messenger arrived at their door, a nervous young boy who kept glancing at Goza as if she might suddenly decide to eat him.
Town council's called for adventurers,
he blurted out after Wren answered.
The ruins beneath the eastern hill. Strange lights been seen, and Farmer Thatcher's boy went missing down there. They're offering 50 gold pieces to anyone who'll investigate.
Wren thanked the boy and closed the door, turning the news over in his mind. The underground ruins had been sealed for as long as anyone in Rivercross could remember, with local legend claiming they contained ancient evils.
We should go,
came the nasal voice from the sword, which Wren had propped in the corner of his study. Over the past days, Malice had been surprisingly well behaved, asking questions about Wren's maps and Goza's metallurgy. The good behavior had made Wren suspicious. Why would we do that? Wren asked.
Because I sense something familiar down there.
The sword's voice took on a wheedling tone.
Something that might explain why I can't harm you. Perhaps even break our connection.
Wren raised an eyebrow. You've been trying to get rid of me since we met.
And I'll continue trying until my dying day,
Malice agreed cheerfully.
But aren't you curious? A cartographer should want to map unexplored ruins, shouldn't he?
When Goza returned from her forge that evening, Wren explained the council's call and Malice's suggestion. A trap, Goza said immediately. The low-mouth blade wants to lure you to danger. Without a doubt, Wren agreed. But I've been researching those ruins for years. Local history suggests they predate the town by centuries. I've never had a legitimate reason to explore them. Goza looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once, decisively. We go together. I bring my hammer.
Oh, splendid,
Malice muttered.
The happy couple's underground adventure. Try not to bill and coo the entire time. Some of us have sensitive stomachs.
You don't have a stomach, Wren pointed out.
I have standards,
the sword retorted. The Tilted Tankard Tavern served as the meeting point for those answering the council's call. Wren and Goza found themselves seated at a table with 3 others, an elf woman who looked like she'd stepped out of an ancient painting, only to immediately find the nearest bottle, a dwarf whose beard contained what appeared to be half a meat pie and several trinkets of uncertain origin, and a halfling who kept looking around with bright, calculating eyes. Is this it? The elf asked, her voice cultured but slurred at the edges. This is the brave band that will save Rivercross from certain doom. Lysel exaggerates, the dwarf said, taking a deep pull from his tankard. She was saying the same thing when we fought those goblins last month, and the cockatrice before that, and the possessed scarecrow before that. All of which nearly killed us, Durgan, Lysel pointed out, brushing silver hair from violet eyes that couldn't quite focus. And this time we have, what, a librarian and his pet orc? Goza's hand tightened on her mug, denting the metal. Cartographer, actually, Wren corrected mildly. And Goza is a master blacksmith, not my pet. She's his wife, added the halfling, who had somehow acquired Wren's coin purse without him noticing. She handed it back with an apologetic smile. Sorry, condition. I'm Penny. His wife, Lysel repeated, suddenly seeming much more sober. As in married, legally, ethically? 5 years, Goza confirmed, staring the elf down. Problem? Durgan cleared his throat loudly.
No, let's not start with the racial tensions before we've even left the tavern. Save that for when we're trapped in a death maze, shall we? He drained his mug. Though I do have to ask, lad, was it a raid situation? Captured young? Stockholm Syndrome is nothing to be ashamed of.
We met at a map-making convention, Ren said, adjusting his spectacles. Gorza was presenting metallurgical samples for cartographic inking techniques. The halfling broke the awkward silence that followed. That's actually sorta sweet.
It's disgusting,
came Malice's voice from Ren's side, where the sword had been quietly playing the role of ordinary weapon.
You should hear them at night. Oh, all that academic discourse and mutual respect. Oh, makes me want to vomit if I had the organs for it.
3 pairs of eyes widened as they focused on the black blade with its now visible mouth. Is that sword talking? Lysel asked. And judging your love life? Added Penny. Durgan squinted at it.
More importantly, is it supposed to have teeth like that?
It took nearly an hour to explain Malice, during which time Durgan drank 4 more tankards. Lysel's expression cycled between disgust and fascination, and Penny attempted to steal the sword twice, returning it with quick apologies both times. As they prepared to leave the tavern, an elderly man in scholarly robes approached their table. Deep lines etched his face, and he leaned heavily on a gnarled staff.
I couldn't help overhearing, he said,
eyes fixed on Malice.
That blade, oh, it bears the mark of Xerxes.
Who's Xerxes? Ren asked, while the sword went unnaturally still in his grasp.
Not who, what?
The old man lowered his voice.
Those ruins were once a prison constructed by the Arcanum Coalition centuries ago to contain a creature of terrible power, a beholder named Xerxes the Collector, who feeds on magical artifacts and those who wield them.
He nodded toward the sword.
That blade bears its maker's mark. It was created by the beholder as a tool to lure powerful wielders to their doom.
5 pairs of eyes turned to the sword, which had gone completely silent. Is that true? Ren asked it. The little mouth worked silently for a moment, then,
I refuse to confirm or deny these scurrilous accusations.
That's a yes, Gorza translated. The old scholar nodded.
Be careful down there. If the shields are failing and Xerxes is stirring, that blade may be trying to bring you, all of you, to it as a feast.
Well, Durgan said, into the silence that followed. Who needs an up for certain death? Just me. Splendid. The entrance to the ruins lay at the base of the hill, just beyond the eastern fields of Rivercross. Ancient stone steps descended into darkness, their edges worn smooth by time. Moss and lichen clung to the cool stone walls. But as they descended deeper, the vegetation gave way to bare rock etched with strange symbols. Ren ran his fingers over the markings. Fascinating. These are warding glyphs from at least 3 different magical traditions. 4, Lysel corrected, her voice now crisp and professional, despite the flask she'd emptied on the walk over. The 3rd series incorporates elements of Visanti runic structures. Smart elf, Gorza grunted, sounding almost approving. Durgan lifted his lantern higher, revealing more of the descending passage. Despite his earlier drinking, he moved with rock-steady sureness.
These wards are active but weakening. Something's been scratching at them from the inside.
Guys, look, Penny called from further ahead. The passage branches. They reached a fork where the stairway split into 3 separate corridors. Ren pulled out a blank parchment and charcoal, quickly sketching their route thus far.
"Let me help," Malice offered from Ren's belt. "I sense a shortcut down the middle passage."
Everyone stared at the sword.
"What?"
The blade's mouth curved in what it probably thought was an innocent smile.
"I want to be useful."
"You want to lead us into a trap," Gozer corrected.
"Can't both be true?"
The sword made a sound like a sigh.
"Fine. Middle passage leads to a trapped corridor. Right passage is the long way around. Left goes nowhere."
Middle passage it is, Ren decided, earning surprised looks from the others. The middle passage narrowed as it descended, the ceiling dropping until even Penny had to duck. The floor grew slick with moisture, making each step treacherous.
"Careful now,"
Malice said, its voice trembling with what sounded suspiciously like anticipation.
"It gets tricky just ahead."
Ren peered into the darkness, trying to spot whatever danger awaited them. His foot hit a loose stone and he stumbled forward with a startled yelp. Arms pinwheeling, he lost his grip on Malice. The sword flew from his hand and clattered down the passageway ahead of them.
"No!"
The sword wailed as it skidded across the floor and directly onto a pressure plate. A series of clicks echoed throughout the passage, followed by the whistle of released mechanisms. Darts shot from the walls, ceiling panels dropped away revealing pit traps, and bladed pendulums swung down from hidden compartments. Every single trap was triggered by the sword's passage, springing harmlessly before the party could reach them. Ren blinked as the noise subsided. Well, that was fortunate.
"Fortunate?"
Malice shrieked from where it lay at the end of the now disarmed corridor.
"That was 37 custom-designed death traps. Do you have any idea how long those take to reset?"
Durgan stroked his beard thoughtfully as they made their way forward.
"Seems the cursed blade just accidentally saved us from the very danger it intended for us." "I hate all of you,"
Malice muttered as Ren retrieved it.
"Especially you, map boy. Your mediocrity is reaching supernatural levels."
The disarmed corridor opened into a large chamber with a domed ceiling. Strange eye-shaped fungi grew along the walls, their stalks swiveling to track the party's movements. "Don't touch those," Durgan warned, holding his lantern closer to examine one without making eye contact. "Beholder spars. They're sensory organs. Everything we do here is being watched." "By the beholder itself?" Penny asked, inching away from the nearest cluster. Not directly. Think of them as remote eyes. They feed information back to the main creature." "We should destroy them," Lizelle suggested, raising her hands to cast a spell. "No," Durgan caught her wrist. "Magic near those is dangerous. They absorb and redirect arcane energy, sometimes explosively." Malice's voice came from Ren's belt, sounding oddly casual.
"You could cut them with a blade. That would be safe enough."
"Would it?" Ren asked, suspiciously.
"Absolutely. Just a quick slash, nothing fancy."
Ren narrowed his eyes at the sword but drew it anyway. "If this backfires spectacularly, I'm using you as a tent peg for the next decade."
"Such threats from the map maker," Malice scoffed. "Just cut the damned mushrooms."
Ren approached the nearest cluster and, after a moment's hesitation, slashed Malice through the fungi. The blade sliced cleanly through the stalks, which collapsed with a hiss, A milky substance coated the black blade, and for a moment the runes along its length glowed brighter.
"Ha!" Malice exclaimed. "I knew it! Essence of the beholder's sight! I can feel—"
The sword stopped abruptly.
"Wait. This isn't right. This is blinding, Agent! You've just temporarily blinded one of the beholder's eyes!"
Durgan's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Really? Let me see." He examined the severed fungi and the residue on the blade. "By Moradin's hammer! The sword is right. This fluid disrupts the connection between these spores and whichever eye they feed. Cut them all." The next half hour was spent systematically destroying every fungal cluster they could find, coating Malice thoroughly in the milky substance. The sword alternated between outrage at being
misused as a glorified gardening tool
and reluctant fascination with the effect.
"I've never been used against my creator before,"
it admitted as they finished.
"It's confusing."
"Your creator imprisoned in these ruins for centuries," Gorza pointed out. "Never sent help. Never set you free." The little mouth worked silently for a moment.
"I hadn't considered that perspective."
After clearing the chamber, they continued deeper. The passage opened into a partially flooded room where ancient columns rose from dark water. Narrow stone walkways crisscrossed between the columns, many crumbling and treacherous. "I'll go first," Gorza said, testing a walkway with her foot. "Heaviest." "Always the noble savage," Lysel muttered. Taking a swig from a fresh flask that had appeared from somewhere within her robes, Gorza turned, amber eyes flashing. "Something to say, elf?" "Just wondering what exactly a sophisticated cartographer sees in someone who communicates primarily in grunts and broken sentences." Lysel's voice dripped with centuries of elven superiority. "My wife speaks 7 languages, Ren said quietly. "I'm sorry?" 7, fluently. He adjusted his spectacles. "Common, Orcish, Dwarven, Old Imperial, Sylvan, Abyssal, and Celestial. She has 3 advanced degrees in metallurgical engineering from the Academia Artifice. She speaks simply because she chooses to, not because she must." An uncomfortable silence fell over the flooded chamber. "What I don't understand," Durgan said after a moment, "is what someone of her obvious capability sees in, well..." He gestured vaguely at Ren's ink-stained hands and scholarly appearance. Gorza's serious expression softened as she looked at her husband. "What does Orc see in him?" She seemed to consider her words carefully. "He never assumes, never judges. He asks, he listens." A small, tender smile revealed the tips of her tusks. "At convention, all others saw Orc. Expected brute. He saw the alloy samples, asked about bonding techniques, spoke to me like person, not curiosity." She shrugged her massive shoulders. "Also, very pretty eyes and nice butt." Ren blushed furiously while Malice made retching noises from his belt.
"If you're all quite done with this touching cultural exchange," the sword interjected, "we're still standing in a half-collapsed death trap with who knows what lurking in that water."
As if summoned by the sword's words, the dark surface rippled. Something long and sinuous moved beneath. "Nobody move," Penny whispered, her small hand reaching slowly for one of the many daggers strapped to her belt. Too late. A tentacle, glistening and covered in tooth-like protrusions, shot from the water and wrapped around Ren's ankle. He had only time for a startled, "Oh dear," before being yanked off the walkway. "Ren!" Gorza roared, lunging for him but missing by inches. Water closed over Ren's head as he was dragged downward. He flailed, disoriented, managing to draw Malice from his belt. The sword's mouth was clamped shut against the water, but its runes glowed brightly, illuminating a nightmare creature with too many limbs and a circular, gnashing maw. Gripping Malice with both hands, Ren jabbed awkwardly at the tentacle holding him. The black blade sank into the rubbery flesh, and immediately the creature released him, thrashing in pain. Ren kicked upward, breaking the surface with a desperate gasp. "Ha! Here!" Penny called. Having somehow crossed to the nearest column, she extended a rope. "Grab on!" A massive splash announced Gauze's entrance into the water. She swam with powerful strokes toward Ren, ignoring Durgan's shouts that they had the situation under control. As she reached him, the creature surfaced, a twisted thing like an octopus bred with a lamprey, its body covered in malformed eyes. "Spawn of Xerxes," Durgan called. Lysel, balanced on a column, finally seemed fully sober. She traced complex gestures in the air, violet energy crackling around her fingers. "Move apart," she commanded. "I can't target it with you so close."
Hit the eyes!"
Malice gasped, spitting water from its little mouth.
"The central cluster!"
Gauze lifted her hammer, which she'd somehow kept hold of during her plunge, and brought it down with bone-crushing force on the creature's eye-covered central mass. The spawn shrieked, a sound like breaking glass, and descended into the depths. Lysel's spell, now lacking a target, fizzled at her fingertips. "Was trying to help," she muttered. "Good guidance," Gauze said, nodding at Malice as she helped Ren to the walkway. "Accurate weakness assessment." The sword's mouth opened and closed several times.
"I thank you?"
They made it across the flooded chamber without further incident, though Ren shivered in his soaked clothing until Durgan muttered a prayer that seemed to involve at least 3 different deities, and somehow dried him instantly. "That shouldn't have worked," Lysel remarked, eyeing the dwarf suspiciously. "Divine favor is mysterious," Durgan replied serenely, taking a swig from a flask not unlike her own. They set up a small camp in a defensible alcove beyond the flooded chamber. Everyone needed rest after their ordeal. Ren spread out his map in progress, adding details while the others tended to minor injuries or, in Durgan's case, napped sitting upright against a wall. Penny sidled over to Ren, her eyes on Malice. "That's quite a blade you've got there. Very unusual. Valuable, I'd imagine."
"Priceless,"
the sword agreed.
"and wasted on this quill pusher. You, on the other hand, I sense real potential in you. A natural rogue's instinct, quick fingers, quicker mind."
"It's trying to manipulate you into stealing it," Ren said without looking up from his map. Penny grinned. "I know. Just wanted to see what promises it would make." She settled beside him. "So, you and Gorza, how'd that really happen? The convention story seems a bit underwhelming." Ren smiled, glancing over to where his wife was examining the chamber walls. "Truth is often less dramatic than fiction. I've met orcs. They're not usually known for their scholarly interests. That's because most people never ask." Ren set down his charcoal stick. "We were both reaching for the same atlas, a rare edition of Keldarn's coastal territories. Our hands touched over the book's spine." He smiled at the memory. "I was so startled I knocked over my ink bottle, all over her presentation materials. Ouch. I was mortified, kept apologizing while trying to save her samples. Instead of getting angry, she just watched me panic. Then she asked what I found so fascinating about Keldarn's work. His voice grew soft. No one had ever asked me that before. I talked for nearly an hour about cartographic techniques and coastal erosion patterns. She listened to every word, asked intelligent questions. When I finally remembered to be embarrassed about the ink, she showed me how the stains had actually created an interesting effect on the metal, revealed stress patterns she hadn't been able to see before.
"Stop asking about their sick union,"
Malice interjected. After their rest, the party continued downward through narrowing passages. Malice had been unusually quiet since the flooded chamber, occasionally mumbling to itself about conflicting directives and loyalty. "Is the sword having an existential crisis?" Lysel asked as they navigated a particularly tight corridor. "Breaking its directives, perhaps?" Durgan suggested. "Creatures like that are created with specific purposes. Going against that purpose can cause disruptions." "I can hear you," Malice snapped. "And I'm not having a crisis. I'm strategizing." The passage opened suddenly into a side chamber filled with ancient statues. The figures were carved from black stone, each depicting armored warriors in various fighting poses, their faces hidden behind full helmets. "Don't touch anything and walk carefully between the tiles," Durgan warned, examining the statues with a critical eye. "These are guardian constructs, probably inactive, but no sense taking chances." Malice's voice came low and urgent from Ren's belt. "Take me out. I sense something important in here." "Is it another trap?" Ren asked suspiciously. "No. Well, yes, but not the way you think. There's something familiar. Something of Xerxes." But not Xerxes itself." Cautiously, Ren drew the sword and held it before him. The blade trembled in his grip, its runes pulsing. "There! That alcove behind the largest statue." Ren stepped carefully between the silent stone figures. As he passed the center of the room, Malice suddenly jerked in his hand, pulling free with impossible strength, and clattering to the floor by the feet of the largest statue. "Oh no!" the sword said with obviously fake dismay. "How clumsy of you to drop me." The statue's head turned with a grinding sound, empty eye sockets fixed on Ren, then on the sword, then back to Ren, stone fingers flexed. "You activated them!" Penny shouted, already backing toward the entrance. "Grab the sword and run!" More statues began to move, stone joints creaking as ancient magic animated them. The largest one reached for Malice, but Ren dove forward, snatching the blade before stone fingers could close around it. "No!" Malice wailed. "That was my ticket out of here! The construct serves Xerxes! They would have taken me to it!" "And left my bones as decoration," Ren added, backing away as the statues advanced. "Details, details!" The first statue lunged, its stone fist whistling through the air toward Ren's head. He ducked with a startled, "Sorry," and stumbled backward, nearly falling. The statue's momentum carried it forward, crashing into one of its companions. "Fight back, you fool!" Malice shrieked as Ren continued to dodge and weave, apologizing profusely to each statue, as if they were party guests he'd inconvenienced. "I'm a cartographer, not a warrior." Ren ducked another swing, accidentally causing two more statues to collide. Behind him, Gorza had waded into the animated figures, her hammer chiseling stone with each blow. Lysel's magic glowed at the edges of the melee, weakening the construct's joints, while Penny darted between stone legs, hamstringing them with precise dagger strikes that honestly didn't do much, but it's the thought that mattered. And Durgan stood at the entrance, chanting something that caused attacks to spread across stone surfaces whenever his voice rose. Ren kept retreating, his movements somewhere between a dance and a panic, leading several statues on a bizarre chase that resulted in them crashing into each other or the walls. His apparent lack of any fighting pattern seemed to confuse their magical programming. They kept readjusting their approach as if unable to predict his movements.
"What are you doing?"
Malice demanded as Ren ducked beneath another swing, causing yet another collision. "My best!" Ren gasped, narrowly avoiding being crushed. By the time the last statue crumbled under Gauze's hammer, the chamber was filled with rubble, and Ren was pressed against the far wall, breathing heavily but somehow unscathed. Durgan picked his way through the debris, examining Ren with wonderment. "In 30 years of adventuring, I've never seen anything like that. You fought them without fighting them." "I wouldn't call it fighting," Ren said modestly. "More like enthusiastic avoidance." Lizelle, brushing stone dust from her robes, looked at Ren with new respect. It was actually quite effective. They're made to counter conventional combat tactics. Your flailing confused them. "Tactical flailing," Penny suggested with a grin. Even Malice seemed subdued.
"You should have died in there,"
the sword said quietly.
"Any decent fighter would have engaged directly and been overwhelmed by superior numbers. Your complete lack of training saved you."
"Spry man," Gauze said, wrapping an arm around Ren's shoulders and squeezing gently. "Very effective." They camped again in a small chamber beyond the statue room, everyone feeling the need for rest before continuing deeper. Gauze insisted on taking first watch, positioning herself at the entrance with her hammer across her knees. The others settled into corners, Durgan falling asleep almost instantly, his snores echoing softly. Penny approached Gauze after the others had drifted off. "Mind some company?" The orc shrugged one massive shoulder, which Penny took as an invitation enough to sit nearby. "I wanted to ask," she began hesitantly. "It's none of my business, but why orc marry human?" Gauze's amber eyes remained fixed on the passage beyond. "Well, yes. Sorry, I'm being awfully nosy, but I can't help it. It's just your people and his people don't exactly get along." Gauze's mouth twitched. "True, my clan disowned me. His parents refused to visit. Old hatreds run deep." She glanced at the sleeping form of her husband, but Ren never saw orc, just saw me. First time in life. Was person first, orc second. She turned her gaze back to Penny. "Most look at orc woman, see threat, see monster. Fear or hate in eyes. Ren looked at hands first, saw calluses from forge, ink stains from writing, asked about work. Not tribe." A soft smile crossed her face. "Asked to see notes on metal patination. Said handwriting was elegant. No one ever called orc elegant before." "I think I understand," Penny said softly. "When love's strongest?" Gauze asked. "When matches what others expect, or when grows despite everything against it?" She tapped her chest. "Had to be twice as certain. Fight twice as hard for our bond. Makes it twice as strong." From the darkness near Ren's pack came Malice's subdued voice.
"I don't understand any of you. Love, friendship, these are weaknesses, vulnerabilities to exploit."
"Says Lonely Sword, abandoned by Creator for centuries." Gauze replied without heat. The blade had no response to that. They reached the final chamber the next day. The passage widened gradually until it opened into an enormous cavern with a ceiling lost in darkness above. At its center, a circular platform hung suspended over a bottomless pit, connected to the outer rim by a single narrow bridge. The walls were covered in curved mirrors that reflected and distorted their torchlight.
"This is it," Durgan whispered. "The prison chamber."
As they watched, magical lights began to glow around the platform's edge, illuminating ancient rooms that pulsed with unearthly power. The mirrors on the walls reflected the light, creating a dizzying kaleidoscope effect. "I feel strange," Lysel said, pressing a hand to her temple. "The magic here is overwhelming."
"Xerxes," Malice whispered, vibrating in Ren's grip. "It's awakening."
No sooner had the sword spoken than the air above the central platform wavered. Reality seemed to fold in on itself, and a massive shape emerged from nothing. Xerxes the Collector hung suspended in the air, its rough spherical body covered in mottled yellowed skin like ancient parchment. Atop its mass floated a massive central eye, lidded and heavy, surrounded by a crown of smaller eyes on writhing stalks. Each stalk ended in an orb of different color and size, constantly moving and examining. The central eye slowly opened, revealing a pupil like a black pit ridged with amber. It fixed immediately on Malice.
"My child."
The beholder's voice reverberated through the chamber, bypassing their ears and resonating directly in their minds.
"You have returned and brought me food." "Great Lord Xerxes,"
Malice called out, its tiny voice suddenly formal and subservient.
"I return to your glory with offerings."
Ren felt a chill as the sword grew warm in his hand. Energy seemed to flow from his arm into the blade, a steady drain that left him suddenly lightheaded. "What's happening?" he gasped, finding himself unable to release the sword.
"The true curse," Durgan said grimly, readying his mace. "It's draining your life force to feed its master."
The beholder's many eyes turned their attention to the party. One stalk focused on Durgan, and a beam of sickly green light shot forth. Where it struck, the dwarf's flesh began to harden, turning the same color and texture as stone. "Petrification!" Lysel shouted, beginning a counterspell. Another eye turned to her, emitting a cone of purple energy that caused her spell to fizzle out instantly. "Anti-magic field," she gasped. "I can't." A third beam, bright red, lashed out at Penny, who dove behind a column just in time. The stone where she had stood melted into slag. Gorza roared and charged across the narrow bridge, her hammer raised high. A blue beam caught her mid-stride, lifting her into the air and flinging her against the wall with telekinetic force. She crashed into one of the mirrors, shattering it, and fell limply to the ground. "Gorza!" Ren cried, trying again to drop Malice and go to his wife. The sword clung to his hand, as if fused there.
"It's no use, map boy,"
Malice said, almost sympathetically.
"The connection is established. Your life will feed the collector, as will the others. This is what I was made for."
Ren felt his strength continuing to drain away. His vision blurred, and his knees buckled. As he fell to a kneeling position, still held upright only by the sword, his mind raced through everything they'd seen. The labyrinth, the ley lines he'd been mapping, the fungi that blinded the beholder's remote eyes, the reversed flow of power when they destroyed those eyes. Flow, direction, connection. "Connection goes both ways," he whispered, a plan forming through his fading consciousness. With his remaining strength, Ren drove Malice's point into the stone floor, directly atop a junction of the runes he'd been mapping throughout their journey. The black blade sank in as if the rock were butter.
"What are you doing?"
Malice shrieked.
"This isn't how it works!"
Ren placed both hands on the hilt, concentrating on the flow of energy felt moving through the sword. In his mind, he visualized it as he would a river on one of his maps, and then imagined that river reversing course. "Your curse flows from me to you, to Xerxes," he gasped, "but the connection goes both ways." The runes beneath them flared with sudden light. The sword's mouth opened in a silent scream as the energy flow shuddered, faltered, and then violently reversed. Now it was the beholder's power flowing into Malice, then into Ren, not to strengthen him, but passing through him into the ancient rune network beneath the entire labyrinth. "What is this?" Xerxes' mental voice boomed, suddenly uncertain. "What trickery?" The beholder's central eye widened in alarm as its energy drained away. The eye stalks began to droop, their beams flickering and fading. The petrification consuming Durgan slowed, then stopped at his chest, leaving him half stone but conscious. "Clever," the dwarf gasped, "using the prison's own containment system against it." Lysel, free from the anti-magic field as the beholder weakened, unleashed a barrage of arcane missiles at the creature's many eyes. Penny, seeing her chance, broke from cover and flung dagger after dagger with uncanny accuracy. Gauza struggled to her feet, bloody but unbowed. She retrieved her hammer and, with a primal roar, charged again across the bridge. This time, the beholder had no strength to stop her. Her hammer connected with the central eye with a sickening crunch, and Xerxes shrieked, an actual sound now, high and piercing. The creature crashed onto the platform, its body convulsing. Eye stalks thrashed wildly, remnants of their beams shooting in random directions. One passed harmlessly through Ren, who remained kneeling, still channeling energy through Malice into the runes. With a final spasm, Xerxes lay still. The magical lights around the platform flickered, then stabilized to a steady glow. Silence fell across the chamber, broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors. "Is it dead?" Penny asked, cautiously approaching. "Not dead," Bergen said, hobbling forward with his stone legs moving awkwardly. "Contained again. The prison system has reset. See how the runes have changed pattern." Ren, exhausted beyond words, finally managed to release Malice. The sword fell silent, its runes pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Gauza rushed to Ren's side, gathering him in her arms. "Brave mapman," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "Not brave," he murmured, "just observant. Is the same thing. Sometimes." Lysel examined Durgan's half-petrified form. "This can be reversed, but will need specialized help." "Worth it," the dwarf grunted. "Makes for a great story. The time I became a decorative garden fixture from the waist down." Penny poked at Malice with the tip of her boot. "What about this thing? Still dangerous?" The sword's little mouth moved weakly.
"I don't know. Something's changed. The connection to Xerxes remains, but it's different."
Ren, still leaning against Gauza, reached for the blade. This time, Malice made no attempt to harm him when his fingers touched the hilt. "The flow is reversed permanently," Ren said, feeling the subtle magic still moving through the sword. "It no longer drains to feed Xerxes, but draws a tiny amount of the beholder's power to sustain itself." "And that means?" Lysel prompted. The little mouth curved into a confused frown.
I think I'm bound to protect this insufferable mapmaker now, rather than harm him."
"Ha!" Goza barked a triumphant laugh. Sword now must guard what it wanted to destroy.
This is humiliating,
Malice groaned.
Thousands of years as a legendary soul-drinking blade, reduced to bodyguard for the most mediocre human in existence.
Could be worse, Durgan pointed out. You could be half stone. Or fully dead, added Penny cheerfully. Or alone for another 1,000 years in dark ruins. Goza said, more softly. The sword fell silent at that, its mouth working thoughtfully. 3 days later, they emerged from the underground labyrinth, battered but alive. The town of Rivercross welcomed them as heroes once they explained how they had contained the threat beneath their homes. Durgan was taken to the temple where the clerics began the slow process of reversing his petrification. Lizelle, to everyone's surprise, stayed to assist, claiming an academic interest in the case but showing a suspiciously tender concern for the dwarf's health. Penny disappeared the night of their return feast, but not before returning every single item she'd accidentally acquired during their journey, along with a note promising to visit again when she needed competent companions for her next adventure. Ren and Goza returned to their cottage by the forge, lives forever changed by their experiences, but their bond stronger than ever. Malice, still bound to Ren but now in a reversed relationship of protection rather than harm, remained loudly disgusted by their domestic bliss.
Must you kiss her every morning? It's revolting,
the sword complained from its new place of honor on the mantelpiece above the hearth.
And what's with all these maps everywhere? Your organizational system is an offense to logical minds.
There is a system, Ren insisted, carefully unfurling his completed map of the labyrinth, his most detailed work yet, showing not just the physical passageways but the flow of magical energies throughout the complex. The town council had commissioned copies for their archives, making it his most profitable work to date.
If there's a system, why can't I figure it out? I'm a semi-sentient magical artifact with centuries of accumulated knowledge.
Because, Goza said, entering with a tray of tea things, system makes sense to mapmaker, not talking pointy metal.
That's exactly my point. It's subjective, it's inefficient, it's
average, Ren suggested with a small smile. The sword's mouth snapped shut, then reopened with a huff.
I walked right into that one, didn't I? Like statue hitting other statue.
Goza agreed, pouring tea into Ren's favorite chipped mug. As the sword launched into another tirade about proper weapon storage and the indignity of its current position, Ren caught Goza's eye over the rim of his mug. She winked, and he felt the same rush of affection he'd experienced the first day they met. Some might call their life together ordinary. A human and an orc in a cottage by a forge, making maps and metalwork, now with a grumpy enchanted sword as an unlikely housemate. But Ren knew better. In a world of heroes and villains, of grand destinies and ancient curses, finding connection despite differences was perhaps the most extraordinary achievement of all. And if being extraordinary meant being miserable and alone like Malice had been for centuries, well, he'd choose mediocrity any day.
You're smiling that sappy smile again,
Malice groaned from the mantelpiece.
I can feel it from here. It's giving me magical indigestion.
Good. Goza and Ren said in perfect unison, and the cottage filled with their laughter and the sword's exasperated sighs.